Today we're taking a look at our macro extension tube for M42 mount film cameras. The M42 mount is a screw thread mount that is very old. It goes way back into the earlier days of film photography. And as far as I know, there aren't any M42 mount digital cameras, but there are plenty of film cameras that people still use today, including this Russian Zenit 312M, which is a camera that I use occasionally. And if you use a camera like this, you've probably wondered in the past, can I get a macro extension tube for it? And the answer is yes, you can, and Fotodiox offers one right here. This is our M42 macro extension tube. It has 3 sections to it: a 7mm section, a 14mm section, and a 28mm section. And it has an M42 thread on the back and the front. And you can put this macro extension tube between your M42 lens and your M42 camera to make any M42 lens focus much closer up. Basically, this macro extension tube can turn any M42 mount lens into an extreme close focus macro lens. Here's how to mount the macro extension tube on your M42 camera and lens. I'm just going to take the M42 lens off, screw it off the camera, and then we're going to simply put the lens on the front of the macro extension tube, thread it into place, and then rotate it to lock it onto the front of the macro extension tube. Then we're just going to treat this like a lens, thread it into the M42 mount on the camera, and rotate it to lock it into place. And this is with the full length of the macro extension tube, 7mm, 14mm, and 28mm. So this is a 49mm macro extension tube. So if we use the entire length of this tube, this is going to be a very close focusing lens. We're going to be able to focus on something less than an inch from the lens. Obviously, it depends on what lens you're using. Different lenses will have different minimum focusing distances. So when you put extra space between the lens and camera, it will have a different effect on what the new minimum focusing distance is. But basically, by putting extra space between the lens and camera, we are increasing the minimum focusing distance, turning any M42 lens into a macro focusing lens. Now, if we don't need this much minimum focus adjustment, if we just need a little bit of minimum focus adjustment, if we just need to increase our minimum focus slightly, we can do that by using a shorter amount of the macro extension tube. And that's pretty simple. We can just unscrew these macro extension tubes into their 3 parts. So now we have the 7mm, 14mm, and 28mm separate. Let's say we want to use the 14mm. So it's going to work just like when we had them all connected. We're just going to have a shorter tube. We're going to thread the 14mm tube onto the lens, thread it onto the camera. And there we go. Now we just have the 14mm part of the tube. So we're not going to have as extreme of a minimum focus, but we'll still have more of a minimum focus than the lens by itself. So really, it just depends on how much you need to focus. If you're doing very small subjects, you need a very extreme minimum focus. You're going to want to use probably all 3 of the tubes at 49mm. If you have just slight focus, you might just want to use the 14mm or the 7mm. And again, it depends on what M42 lens you're using. If your M42 lens already has a close focus, to increase the minimum focusing distance even more, you probably won't need the full 49mm length. You probably only need a smaller length to get the minimum focusing distance you need. And then to store the tube, we can have them all separate, but it's probably easier when you're not using them just to thread the 3 tubes together to have one for easier storage. Now this is a 49mm macro extension tube that can go down to 7mm, but what if you want more adjustment? What if you want to be able to adjust your minimum focusing distance while you are shooting? Well, that's where our second M42 thread macro product comes in. This is our M42 macro helicoid extension. And what this does is this actually has a built-in macro helicoid that you rotate to increase the length. And this will increase your minimum focusing distance. So this starts at 16 millimeters and goes to 30 millimeters of extension. So that gives you a really nice range of macro extension. Depending on how much you need, you can just crank it in with this ring, this built-in macro helicoid. Mounting this on your lens and camera is very simple. You're just going to thread your M42 lens on the front like this, rotate it till it locks into place, and then thread the macro helicoid onto your camera, rotate it till it locks into place. There we go. And then to increase the macro extension from 16 millimeters to 30 millimeters, we're just going to rotate this ring. We go from 16 to 30. And then we can go somewhere in the middle too if we want to be closer to like 20 millimeters. However much extension you need, you can crank it in with this macro helicoid. Okay, that was a quick look at our macro extension tube for M42 cameras, as well as our macro helicoid for M42 lenses and cameras. If you have any questions about anything I said in today's video, comment below. I'd love to help you out. Plus, click the links in the description below to learn more about our macro extension tube for M42 and our macro helicoid for M42. Now, we don't just carry macro tubes for M42 mount cameras. We carry them for pretty much every kind of camera mount and lens mount out there. And if you'd like to learn more about those, click the link in the description as well. Plus, click right here to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get more videos just like this one. I'm Sean with Fotodiox.com, and thanks for watching.